Devil's Workshop number 14. My name is Freeman Michaels, and my goal is the complete and total freedom of every human being on the planet. In this video, I wanted to talk about where I've come from, what's my plan on how to free everybody, and an example of how people can get started. So to get going, I wanted to first replay this video I did in the 2016 Bernie primary.
This is what I believe. Every great religion in the world, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, essentially comes down to do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. As a 22-year-old kid getting arrested in Chicago fighting segregation, I believed it in my whole life, that we are in this together, not words. The truth is, at some level, when you hurt, when your children hurt, I hurt. I hurt. And it's very easy to turn our backs on kids who are hungry or veterans who are sleeping out on the street. And we can develop a psyche, a psychology which says, I don't have to worry about them. All I'm going to worry about myself. I need to make another $5 billion. Hey, this whole world is me. I need more and more. I don't care about anybody else. I believe that what human nature is about is that everybody in this room impacts everybody else in all kinds of ways that we can't even understand. It's beyond intellect. It's a spiritual, emotional thing. When we say that that child who is hungry is my child, when we do the right thing, when we try to treat people with respect and dignity, I think we are more human. That's my religion. That's what I believe in. And I think, most people around the world, whatever their religion, their color, share that belief that we are in it together as human beings. If we destroy the planet because we don't deal with climate change, trust me, we are all in it together. That is what my spirituality is about.
So needless to say, I was moved by Bernie in the 2016 primary. And prior to Bernie running for office, I'd listened to Tom Hartman, and Brunch with Bernie on Fridays was kind of one of the radio highlights of my week. And when he ran for office and he didn't change his message like everybody else had, I was like, oh man, this is it. This is our chance. And I thought if other people saw that they would be politically motivated, and then the political revolution that he was talking about would take over and life would be great. I never really cared for the Democratic Party. I'm not a conservative, so I wasn't a Republican. But during the 2016 primary, it really kind of brought things home that they're the swamp. They're disgusting. And it's not the Democratic voters. It is the money behind the Democratic Party and whatever their agenda is. That is something that I don't think is not something I'm okay with. And it wasn't, there was always the Medicare for all. Of course, people should have health care. And of course, in my opinion, capitalism isn't going to provide it. But learning in 2016 that if your votes aren't even going to be counted accurately, to expect that the people who are doing that are going to give you reasonable health care, I don't think is a good expectation. And then in 2017, since I wasn't on board with Hillary, I decided that I was going to do something different. I tried to run for office, and when that got cut ridiculously short, I tried to push this idea of cooperation, and it was, in my opinion, it was the obvious solution between what progressives wanted and conservatives wanted. But it's like the response I got was a consistent, yeah, dude, whatever. And it's not that people didn't believe me. It was that it just wasn't the right time. They weren't focused on it. If you were on the left, you were focused on getting rid of Trump. If you were on the right, you were happy because you were getting pretty much what you voted for. The goal of the new model that I'm proposing wants to combine individual freedom and the collective good. And I think those are two things that you really don't want to sacrifice at all. And the way we have our system now is that since it's top down, the collective good is defined by what we all vote for, and then you're going to need an enforcement arm to force people to be good. So if you can convince the planet that climate change is a threat, then the collective good is to save the planet, of course. But maybe the solution you're pushing to save the planet, or maybe some of the problems you initially were pushing, were slightly inaccurate. So that would cut into individual freedom. So we want a system that values the freedom and the collective good. And the collective good doesn't have to be forced, because when people see the truth in front of them, they generally want to do the right thing. Maybe a few of us don't, like there are some of us that are psychopaths or sociopaths, and that's within us. But the overwhelming majority of people just want to live and let live. So the solution is a bunch of word salad, distributed public network based on mutual voluntary cooperation. And I spent a lot of time, like back here, where is it? There. If you could just stop talking. I spent a lot of time trying to describe this system and what people could do, and it wasn't landing. And even in Devil's Workshop number 13, I felt like I did a really good job of saying, this is what it is. And the first version I uploaded, only half of it got uploaded, and nobody noticed. So I re-uploaded it again, but like that was a sign to me that people just aren't, that either the way I'm delivering the message is off, or they're just not ready for that message yet. But since I kind of knew, and we all know, that human beings are monkey see, monkey do, it's like, okay, you think you know better, great. It's not that I believe you or not, but show me. So that's so that's what I'm in the middle of doing now. I'm about a year into it, and I would want to get other people on board doing similar things of what I'm doing before I get to the point where I can demonstrate to the world, hey, here's a new way to live. So that's one of the points of this video, is to get people to understand another path forward outside of capitalism and government, such that they can start to move in the direction that I'm moving, which is individual freedom and the collective good. And when I describe it, it always comes down to how are you going to pay for it? And as you'll see later, it's not an easy, direct answer. And just the frame of reference that you're asking that question, how am I going to pay for it, kind of shows the mental prison that we're in. It's like everything is solved from the perspective of money. So we chase money. You can see by the little emojis there. We chase money, and that money is controlled by the bank. And then we use that money to get food and shelter and heat. Sometimes when I describe what I'm doing, people say, oh, that's just bartering. The bartering is actually not much better, because what you're doing in bartering, sure, maybe the central bank doesn't have as much influence over society by adjusting the value of money, but you're still, the focus of what you are doing is to produce something to sell to somebody else. And that's the big missing piece. We need to focus on producing something and making it easier to produce things that we need to live, such that we don't have to chase the central bank's money, or we don't have to chase other things that we can barter with. When you are chasing money, or you're chasing things to barter with, your livelihood and your value becomes directly dependent on how well the economy is going. And I don't think that's not a very good, it's not a very sustainable approach, and it's not a very safe feeling. You want to be able to provide for yourself and your family regardless of what the stock market or the economy is doing. So, how are you going to pay for it? Well, let me give you an example of that. And this is an example of how a cooperative economy could start. Since I like emojis, I just do rainbows and unicorns. And then how this cooperative economy can scale up. A lot of times when I talk about it, people say, well, that's great in theory, but communism is great in theory, but once you get too big, it doesn't work. So as an example, let's say you have 10 acres and 10 friends. And I know you're like, how am I going to pay for it? Okay, just let's assume that you have 10 acres for free for the moment, and then we'll get to the paying later. And assume that the store is inconvenient. So you and your friends, you're out maybe in the middle of nowhere, and you don't want to have to go to the store every day, probably not every few days, maybe even every week. It gets annoying. So you kind of change the focus of what you're doing. One, you stock up, of course, but try to figure out how you can get things that you would get at the store already where you are. Now, the food is the obvious one, so you can grow food and raise food, and minimize how much money you're going to need to buy stuff. So if you keep needing to purchase fuel to heat yourself, then there's something that you should focus on. You can almost look at this whole thing like a glamorized long-term camping. It's like, you set up your panels so you have your little radio and you have a fire out there, but fire is not going to be so great long-term because then you have to buy wood, or if you have to turn on a generator all the time, that's no good because you need to keep purchasing fuel. So you just keep looking for ways to figure out how to live without needing to go to the store and without needing money. And you're going to need to do that continue needing to buy stuff from the store for quite a while. But the whole point is to just get to the point where you don't have to worry about how much money you have in order to eat, stay warm, or keep the shelter over your head. And it seems like a small step, but to have personal safety in terms of your food and being warm in the winter, reasonably cool in the summer, is kind of a huge step. Like, people who think that they're going to have some sort of revolution when they can't feed themselves for longer than a week without buying food from the people they're revolting against, I don't think that's a very good long-term strategy. So how can this scale up? So 10 friends you can manage, because when something goes wrong, you can just talk to the person. 25 friends, sure, maybe there's a little drama, but still there's always somebody who knows somebody else. And if there's a problem, the group collectively can handle it. And when you have more people and your goal is producing something as opposed to chasing money, so let me go back to this picture. If your goal is producing energy or your goal is growing food, you're not going to grow it in scarcity. You're going to grow it such that you have a ton left over. As opposed to if you are growing something to sell, then you're trying to maximize the profit. Here, you're trying to maximize your safety and the quality of the food you're eating. And since you have things in abundance, and once you have a farm set up, adding additional people just means expanding the farm, that additional help of labor makes it such that you have more free time to do other things. Or perhaps you can even make your life better. So if you already have an abundance of food in your community and someone comes along and maybe they're not the best farmer, but they're good at fixing things, or they're good at playing music, or they're good at decorating, perhaps in exchange for farming, they can play live violin during weekly dinner, or they can offer massages. And all of these things happen because you are producing abundance, as opposed to looking for something to sell or barter. Everything sounds great when it's under 100 people. Once you get over 100 people, that's when things start to fall apart. And that's why communism fails, that's why capitalism fails. And the reason is that it is too easy to hide amongst the crowd. So if you want to mooch off the system, or if you want to, even worse, leech off the system and do what central bankers do and try to rob the wealth of everybody, it's easy to do that. Why am I going backwards? All right, so old and busted, everyone chasing money, which is a product of the central bank, and then they're using that product to buy things. What I'm suggesting is focus on the goal and not acquiring money. So use energy and cooperation to get all these little emojis that you see. And now if you have 200 people, the question becomes, well, how do you prevent people from slacking? How do you prevent people from leeching? Well, you're producing things in abundance, true, but not everything is going to be in abundance. So among the emojis I have wine and sushi, and suppose you have a heated bidet. So it's freezing now for me, so that's kind of one of the things I'm thinking about. Let's say you have a heated bidet, but then there's a bunch of people in the community who just aren't pulling their weight. You don't have to give them the sushi, because maybe you only even have a limited amount, so you get to pick who you want. Maybe you don't have to share all the wine. Maybe you went and did all this extra effort to set up another bathroom facility that is heated and that has all these nice luxuries. It is a mutual, voluntary, cooperative society, such that if you set something up, you don't have to give it away. You choose to give it away. And you generally want to choose to give it away because that will make you, I guess you'll have better reputation amongst the community because you're providing something, you're cooperating. If you don't have a good reputation, then yeah, you'll get the basics because people don't want, someone to die of hunger or cold in their very community. But at the same time, you may not have to give them everything. And that also may be their choice. Maybe they don't want to do the extra work and they don't really care about heated bidets and wine. That's legit too. So kind of like we have with ride sharing and Airbnb, you can just have a simple ranking system, and it doesn't have to be public. It just has to be public within the community. So if you like someone's service, great. If not, that's fine too. The idea behind this is if you don't like the service they're providing and they're unwilling to change, then you can start your own. So if you don't like how the people are producing energy in your community, well, then you can start buying solar panels and inverter and batteries and start hooking up and doing the same thing they're doing. Since you are cooperating, you generally see what everyone's doing. So right now there's a concept in capitalism is the barrier to entry. It's like if you wanted to start your own Google, that would be tough because that would take a lot of money. Here, yes, money is still a factor. You still have to buy the stuff, but at least you have the intellectual awareness and you have the know-how of how to do it because in your community, these things are open. Like you wouldn't be setting up your organic garden and then wall it off and not show your community how you're doing it. You're better off showing everyone how to do it. That way you may not have to work. And if you don't like what someone's doing or someone doesn't like what you're doing, you're free to walk away. There's no entitlement here. You're not entitled to anything else that anyone else is doing. But because you are incentivized to cooperate, things work out and they scale up. And the big piece is that you're focused on building up things for yourself, your family, and your community, as opposed to only chasing something that is going to give you purchasing power in the future. And I'm not saying you should never chase something for money. Maybe your community grows hemp and they want to sell it because that's scarce. That's fine. Just understand that the focus when you are producing the hemp is now to get money as opposed to using the hemp. However, if you are using the hemp, then the quality of your product goes up and then you can sell the surplus. Or you can change the focus of your community and say, hey, we want to build up, we want more solar panels, so now we're going to produce a bunch of hemp this year and sell it and then use that to grow. That's all legit. You just want to be aware of the motivations behind your actions. So with that, here's from Zeitgeist. This is Jacques Fresco. He wanted to do a Venus project, which is similar to what I'm talking about, but this one is more distributed.
People do not trust each other. A guy will come over to you and say, I got just the house you're looking for. He's a salesman. When a doctor says, I think your kidney has to come out, I don't know if he's trying to pay off a yacht or whether my kidney has to come out. It's hard in a monetary system to trust people.
So, would your community be producing the best hemp because they're using it, or is your community just producing a minimum quality of hemp to make money? That's what Jacques Fresco is talking about. It's hard to trust people. And when you get started, it's like if you're out there with your long-term glamorous camping, not everything is going to have a cash-free solution. So real estate currently, as the banks pretty much run the government or got them by the balls or however that's working out, we're going to have to pay rent and mortgage. And there's no way around that yet. Manufacturing is difficult. That takes a lot of resources to get started. High-tech stuff, obviously we're not going to be producing iPhones anytime soon, but when you have all of the basics without needing to chase the central bank's product, that gives you an amount of freedom. And it shows you a different way of being. And as opposed to right now, everyone has to go to work and we always are competing, hoarding money, and it's like a stress the entire time. This is a stress-free way to get the basics that you need. So how are you going to pay for it? Well, we are going to pay for it. We are buying our way out of capitalism. And there's a big difference between putting solar panels on your roof to save money on your electric bill and putting solar panels on your roof to use that energy to get something directly that you'll need. And as your communities scale up, you can keep them small, large, medium. It's all up to the people in that community. And if you want to trade, cooperate, barter, sell with other communities, that's great too. They all scale up because they're all operating by that same principle. And if they're not operating by that same principle, they're out to try to sell something to you. It becomes quite obvious because they maybe don't have the reputation score that you have. They're not willing to be open about what they're doing. It's a completely different way of connecting and cooperating with people than we do today. And the steel part, that's a aerial shot of Burning Man. And I like to use Burning Man as an example, not because it's an economy it's not even really an economy, but you can take people who behave a certain way in the outside world, and then all of a sudden when you put them in this environment where they don't have to worry about money. For a full week at Burning Man, no one worries about money, no one worries about trading things. It's all about self-sufficiency and radical acceptance. So there is an anxiety that's lifted by people all around because they're not obsessed with money. Like even when people go on vacation, you got to worry about saving this. And when you have that anxiety lifted, more opportunities show up. And you have to be okay with saying no if you are producing something and you don't want to give it away. So this, for me, started in 2016 because Bernie told me to think big. He said, if I ever tell you to vote for it, don't listen. It's up to Hillary to prove it, something like that. She didn't prove it to me. In fact, the DNC proved that they're willing to do pretty much anything in order to avoid addressing world peace and poverty. So you can decide how you want your focus to move forward. Do you want to keep chasing the central bank's product or someone else's product in order to get things from other people that you need to live? Or can you just work on cooperating with those around you to get the things that you need to live?